Hi everyone, my name is Samir Rahman. For my firm, I chose to look into the family business that I've slowly kind of grown a part of in the past year and a half. So I interviewed actually two people jointly, my dad and my uncle, who co-founded the business about 35 years ago. The business is called Indus Design Imports. It's a wholesale furniture business that sells mainly to retail stores and the design trade. The business exports and imports from all over the world, mainly India, China, and Indonesia, then consolidates all the furniture here at our warehouse in Tempe. And then from here, retail and design customers are able to come in and choose what they'd like. So I had never really spoken to my dad or my uncle about their strategy before. So this interview gave me some pretty interesting insights, I think, into how they thought about all this. They actually started the business, like I said, 35 or so years ago, as immigrants from India. And they started by selling rugs just out of the back of a van, where they'd kind of go all over the country, just to local retail stores that they'd find and sell what they had. And slowly, they began to build up the business to what it is today. So they've kind of separated away from selling rugs and that smaller stuff, and now it's mostly furniture that's imported by the container in large amounts to our warehouse here in Tempe. So my dad and my uncle's strategy has kind of evolved over the years. Like I said, at first it was just selling small rugs out of a van, and now it's kind of to a multi store operation. So they've kind of grown into that, and they have a really good understanding of what's going on in all aspects of the business because each one kind of handles a little bit of different aspects. So it was interesting to talk to my dad and my uncle because they came from a background where they didn't have much business education. So they would describe things that I would recognize from our class. That would be the theories that we talked about. And one of those was economies of scale, in which they kind of described as a go big or go home mentality. When they go overseas to purchase things, they purchase it by the container. When other small competitors would either do half containers or air shipments. And the reason you do the bigger containers, at least is what they said, is that the more you can fit in there, the less transportation cost per item that you're importing. And so that kind of verifies the economies of scale. And also, when you have that economies of scale, it also makes everything else here in the warehouse, at least the overhead, more feasible. Because you have to have such a big warehouse, which this one is about 50,000 square feet, with multiple employees, with breakage that comes from international shipping, the more you bring kind of gives you a blanket to cushion all those things. And that was kind of confirmed by what they said, which relates to economies of scale. Most of my experience in the business has kind of been in the back, inventorizing and just kind of the day to day aspects of the business. So I never really knew the grand strategy. And I think one of the main points that I learned from speaking with my dad and my uncle was that they're a differentiated business. Their attraction or what brings customers into the warehouse here is the vast range of products they have and the fact that they don't have much competition, at least here in the valley, because they're so well established, and it takes a pretty significant effort to build up a business like this just because of the cultural, the travel, and all sorts of barriers like that, as well as having enough stock to supply fairly large retail stores. They've kind of cornered a niche market, at least here in the Phoenix Valley. And because they've done that, they don't really have to compete price wise with other, even if there are smaller competitors here. So the vast range of products and the uniqueness that they have, as well as the challenges in trying to imitate that, really gives them a competitive advantage. Another interesting lesson I learned revolved around international strategy. And it was a little bit different from what we had learned about in class. In class, it was mainly about expanding your business internationally. In the case of my dad and uncle, it came from sourcing. So, for most of their sourcing needs, they have to travel across the globe. Like I said before, either to India, China, or Indonesia mainly to secure their products. And they've been doing this for a very long time. So, they've built almost family like connections with many of the suppliers that they work with. And I think this is a very interesting point because, like we learned in class, there are a lot of cultural differences between here in the US and working with other countries. And knowing how to navigate that sort of thing gives you a real competitive advantage. And so, one of the things they pointed out was that a lot of times in the US, it's seen almost negative to treat someone from somewhere else a little bit differently than you would treat someone you'd see here day to day. But you have to remember that the kind of respect and care here is often translated in many different ways around the world. So, them having the knowledge and the experience doing that sets them apart from their competitors. Because, in theory, anybody can go over to any of these countries and start importing whatever they want. But they likely won't get the prices and the care from the suppliers that my dad and uncle have cultivated. And that's just mainly because their cultural IQ, of all these international suppliers is a lot higher. So they know how to deal with them, and they know how to communicate them with them in a way that's most beneficial to both parties. So that's something that I learned that really sets them apart. I thought this whole interview gave me great insight into what my dad and uncle have built. I think being so close to them and the business just growing up, a lot of their background thought or their rationale of their decisions had kind of gone unnoticed. So I really appreciated the opportunity to talk to them about that. I think probably the main thing that I took away from this was their ability to differentiate and to be proud of what they built. Being able to do that lets you show off better, to your customers and your competitors. And I think that's what really drives the business is their pride of what they're doing and how well they've done it and how well they've been able to maintain it. Thanks for watching.